Hello, today I'm going to be using a warm color lesson to show you warm colors. I've started out with an acrylic background on canvas. This is a canvas board. This is dry. This has been previously used using old paint. I'm going to use the paint that I used in my Color Mixing 101 lesson in my previous video. Since I have it already out and mixed, I'm just going to use it for a canvas so that I don't waste it. So with warm colors, you're going to use the colors on the color wheel ranging from red to red-orange to orange to yellow-orange to yellow. And you're going to stop at yellow. Sometimes a yellow-green can be warm if it has more yellow. Sometimes a red-violet can be warm if it has more red. So I'm just going to take the acrylic paint that I mixed, and I'm going to paint right on top of this background. And I'm going to be using mostly reds and oranges here. I might have a little yellow. Also, not to mention it being using warm colors, this is also monochromatic for the most part, for the background, because you have the red there. But if you have several reds, it's going to be monochromatic. But the fact that I'm using another warm color on top of that, that's where the monochromatic part stops. So I'm just kind of freelancing here to use mostly warm colors. Remember, this is acrylic paint. Your solvent is water, unless you're using a water-based medium that keeps it from drying too fast, or that makes it dry faster, or that gives it a texture. There are different mediums that you can use for different qualities of your paint. You want to blend while the paint is wet. This kind of reminds me of a Japanese setting with your cherry blossoms. So I'm kind of going with that color. And I'm just going to make this up in my mind as I go. I'm just going to make a little tree here. This is pure color. The red was a pure Naphthol Crimson out of the tube, straight on top of the background. I didn't have a plan for this. I'm just kind of going with the flow here. Or it could be more of a Hawaiian setting, the sunset or sunrise. So with acrylic, you can pre-mix or you can mix right on the canvas. The more advanced you get, the less pre-mixing that you have to do, or the more, if I say abstract, or you're doing some intuitive painting, where you're not really planning it out. You can go from there. Building up the paint on the surface is called impasto. It's an Italian Renaissance technique. I'm going to put a little bit more orange down there. Now, if I use that red and I want some more orange and it's still not orange enough, I can just take some straight yellow. Since the paint is already wet, go right in there, just like that. And you can mix it right on the canvas. I'm still not feeling that, but it will develop as I go along. And if you don't want to mix it in all the way and have some highlights there, you can. I had a little bit too much water in there. I had to spray my paint so it wouldn't dry. It's kind of wet on that side. Turn your brush different ways, different angles. This is a flat brush. With a flat brush, you're going to see strokes if you don't blend them well, unless that's what you want. And some of the green got in there, but it's okay. It'll the yellow will overwhelm. I'm sorry, the red will overwhelm. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So I'm just making this up as I go along. I'm using that Naphthol Crimson. I'm not using the magenta red for mixing because I wanted a redder red here. The more you move your brush over it, the more it'll mix. So if you don't want it to mix, you know, stop messing with it. Get a little bit of highlights up there. Now what I could do, I could put some yellow here to give the highlight of those leaves, but I'm not sure if I want to do that. I think I want the tree to kind of blend in with the setting sun, or it could be the rising sun. I don't want to get too detailed here because I want it to look more like a silhouette. I want a little bit more yellow here. And I've used up all my yellow on my palette, so I'm going to squeeze some more out. Can't see that part. And I'm going to take it straight out of the tube since like I said, since my paint is already wet. I'm not even gonna, I can just slice it on there. The more you stroke, the more it'll mix. And then you can blend. I could put a sun here. I don't want it to be too cheesy. But like I said, I'm just doing this intuitively. This was not planned. I'm just showing you warm colors. So we've got our reds, we've got our orange, we've got our yellow. And in the process of mixing, we got a yellow orange, we got a red orange. I could put a little bit of the yellow in the background, but I've got too much orange in this brush to do that. So I would have to clean my brush. And I'll do that and come back. Okay, I'm back from the break. I've cleaned my brush. I stepped back away from my painting, which is what you want to do sometimes. You have to get up from it, step back, and look at it from a distance sometimes to see what you need, what you want to do, where you want to go. I discovered that I want more yellow here, and I do want a little bit of yellow in the background. So my brush was loaded with the paint. It was too much paint on the brush. It was too loaded. It was too dirty, if you will. It had too much orange, and it was going to taint my yellow. So I've cleaned my brush, and I'm going to go back in with some yellow straight out of the tube since my paint is already wet. Now, what you can do is use a spray bottle with water in it if you want to keep that wet. I'm not going to do that, but you can spray it with water. That will help keep your acrylic paints wet while you're using them. I'm just going to come in here and slide out that yellow. And if you get that, I'm going to blend that a little bit more. But I don't want to blend too much because I still need my brush clean. I don't want all that muck in my brush. If you go in the other direction, you might mess up that stroke. So I'm going to come back in. Like I said, with a flat brush, you are going to be able to see those strokes. So you have to vary the weight and the pressure that you put on the brush. I'm not going to play with this too much because I want that to stay. I'm going to pick up some more yellow. I want it to come down a little bit further, maybe about there. And you can blend, but I want those highlights to stay. Now it started to dry down here. You can tell when it starts to dry because it gets a little scratchy. So what you do in that case, I'm going to wet my brush just a tad. Keep a paper towel nearby. Just a tad. Now if you wet it too much, it's going to turn milky, sort of. And then I also have paint left on my brush, and I don't want to get that off because I need it for the sky, but I want to blend that. So you don't want to, and the good thing about acrylic is you can paint over it. You don't want to do too much, but you can always paint over it. Or you can get another brush. So if that's not working, get a clean brush, wet it. I'm going to come back in with my red sable brush. It doesn't need to be dripping wet in this case because I just want to, and then that'll pick up the color. I just want to blend in those little dry spots. I need a little bit more water, just a little bit. But I don't want to mix it so much that it gets muddy and it's picking up that other red behind it. So If you manipulate it too much, it'll do the opposite of what you're trying to do. So I'm going to take that brush that I just used and put a little bit more of my red in that little spot that I just picked up. And when it dries, you probably won't even notice. So I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in the background, and then I'll stop here for our warm color lesson. Now I want this, with acrylic paint, you can almost make it look like watercolor if you add more water, and it'll be a wash. So you want your brush really wet, you want the paint mixed already with the water on your palette. You want it really watery. Now I don't know what this is going to look like. I think this is too much paint. No, it's not. Actually, it's not enough. So it's better to have not enough than too much, because sometimes it's easier to add than it is to take away. So I just want a little warm glow here. Like I said, this is dry in the background. You don't want to touch your painting too much. The acid in your hands, that's why when you go to a museum, you can't touch the paintings. The acid in your hands will destroy the painting. So I have a little glare here, but I want more yellow. So I'm just going to take that and make some strokes. You have to work fast with acrylics, especially if you're blending straight on the canvas. Now I'm going to blend that more so that it just doesn't look like a yellow spot in the sky. I always have a paper towel handy, dab and doodle. If you're videotaping yourself, if you're able to see the reflection in the camera, sometimes that can help you look at the reverse image. I don't want to go too far here. If I do, I want to blend. I want to blend. I want to blend. It's not good to do the background over the foreground, but in this case, since it's a wash, it's going to blend, and they're warm colors, it's going to blend. So it looks like a warm glow. It's kind of like the hint of the sunrise or the sunset without actually seeing the sun. So if you're painting on top of wet, you want to have a wetter brush, and your paint needs to be wetter. I need a little bit more down there, but I need this to be a little bit lighter. So there we go. And if you paint that yellow over the top of that pinkish red, it's going to turn a little bit more orange. And I'm being consistent with my direction of my strokes. If you're painting the background over the top of the background after you've already put some foreground, you're going to have to be very careful. That has already dried, so I can go back over that. I can't scrub it too hard because it's not that dry, but it's dry enough to do that. So I still want a little, and I want to keep some of that white in there, or that light color. I want to go to the tree. Be careful that that's wet, because it's going to come into your background. It's going to mess the whole thing up. So I think I want a little bit more yellow down here. Bring that reflection there. I need a little bit more paint sense, but not too much. You just have to, you kind of have to experiment. Layer it in. Do a little bit at a time. If it's still not enough, add more. So add it gradually and slowly. Still want a little bit more. Still wet. The wetter it is, the more it's going to blend. So I had more. I flipped my brush, so I had more on the other side, and it was able to give me a little bit more result there, product. Okay, I don't want that red streak there. I kind of want it to be a little bit more yellow. So you just play around with it. Like I said, this is just intuitive. It wasn't planned out. If it's planned, wonderful. If it's not, wonderful. You are the artist, and you know how you want it. So I'm just layering this in with more pigment on top of that wet part. And I'm just tapping and pulling. I'm tapping and pulling. I'm not pressing hard here, because I'm adding a little bit of that color at a time, and then I need to blend that because it's starting to dry. So like if I had to go back up and rework this, you don't want to rework it too much, because it's going to pick up the old color once it starts to dry, and that's not going to be your friend. Now, what I would like to do is come up here with a little bit of white for some clouds. I'm going to do that. I'm going to clean my brush and come back. Okay, I'm back to do a little bit of the white. I just want a little streak of white across here for a hint of clouds. I don't want too much. I'm going to get a watered down wash using water with my white. Not too much water. If you use too much water in the brush, it'll drip down your canvas and you'll have a disaster. So let's see. I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know if this is too much or not enough. There's already a streak of white here from, all right, that's going to be too much. Already a streak of white in the background. So I'm going to take some of this out of my brush. I'm going to leave that because I can use it and play with it. As long as it's wet, I can still use it. So I'm going to come back with a wet brush. You see how that's going to run? That's going to run if you don't move that. So I'm going to come back with a wet brush. The brush is too wet, so I'm going to take some of that water out with a paper towel. And still too wet. And I'm going to come in with that wash there. Yeah, I think I like that. And I need to go on the top. So I'm going to get some of the white out of my brush, because if I go on the top and there's too much white, it's just going to make it more white. And right now I just want to blend. So I'm just going to take a wet brush. Come on. There we go. Blend that into the background and make it almost disappear. So now I'm just going to take those edges over there, feather it out. Normally you would do your background first, but I was just making this up as I went along. My brush is too wet again. Make sure you work it while it's wet. Make that disappear. I'm just going to make it disappear. Just going to make that disappear. There we go. I think I worked that a little bit too much. I'm going to get just a little bit, tad more white. I'm going to put that back in there. Okay, so that's too wet now. So either I do more paint or dab it with a paper towel. And if you're going to use the paper towel, just be very gentle. Very, very gentle. Just get just enough of the moisture out that you need and no more. Then come back in with a little bit more white. Just kind of want to, now I need to get the white off my brush and blend. Not too much water. I'll just use the corner of the brush. Remember, in nature, everything is horizontal. It's parallel to the horizon line for the most part. So I want that to be a little bit straighter on that edge. I'm kind of eyeballing this. I think it's too much on that side. I'm going to flip to the other corner of the brush because I don't want any white up there. I want to make it go away. Now, what I want to do, I want to drag this across just to blend it. Just drag it, make it disappear. Drag it, make it disappear. This is just water here. I'm just making sure that there's not an obvious streak there. I think this might be too much white. Sometimes you have to step away. Now, I think that might be too much white. So I want to take out the water in my brush, take out the white in my brush, and just blend what's already there, but you need to do it quickly. See, if you don't, I need a little tad more water, not dripping wet. I need to get some of that out or blend it while it's wet. And you can see the strokes, but if it's wet enough, they'll blend, which is what's happening here. So I want to get this little piece of white. So that's too white. I need to pick up some of that color with a damp brush. With a damp brush, I'm picking up that color. See, I'm just picking it up and wiping it off. It's too much. So now I think that's about where I want it. I'm going to go around those edges. You can still see that stroke there. So I'm just going to blend here, blend, 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 blend. So I have to be very careful with that part because I want to get that brush stroke out of there. But I don't want to pick up the color. I don't want to put any more color. Just gently, gently, gently. Accidents are okay because, in nature, it can look natural if you work it right. But I'm just tapping and pulling just barely. So now I got to get that white spot out of there. So I'm going to use the other side, just barely. All right, still too much. So I need to get the color out of my brush, get it wet, then take out the extra, just barely. Pick that color up and move it and blend it. There we go. Last thing I want to do, that still might be too white, but we'll see what it looks like when it dries. Last thing I want to do, I want to put a little bit more red at the base of that tree. I'm going to use my other brush. I'm going to get all the water out of my brush because I don't want, I mean, it can be damp, but it's not going to be dripping wet because I want to use the pigment straight out of that tube because I just want straight red there. I need it to be as dark as possible without it being a shade. So I don't think that's going to work. I'm going to try it and see. And I'm just going to use my impasto technique. I think I want it a little bit like that. I'm going to come to the edge with that red. I'm going to take it up the tree just a little bit, not too much. I don't want a hard line there. I'm going to blend that out just a little bit down here. And I think that's where I'm going to stop. So this is your exercise on warm colors using reds, yellows, orange, just a tad of white. Thank you for watching.